I guess we are live. It's 11 a.m. Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. And I started getting calls as soon as I get live, of course. Welcome back to my channel, and those of you guys who are waiting, thanks for waiting, and thanks for looking forward to this webinar that I've been waiting to publish for such a long time. So in this webinar, I basically invited a Canadian immigration consultant who will answer most of your frequently asked questions around how to apply for study permits in Canada, how to get your study visa, and of course your journey to getting permanent residency in Canada that most of you guys are interested to hear about. So lots of interesting things and exciting things to share. For those of you who are new to this channel, my name is Z, and I make videos for international students who are planning on coming to Canada and become successful international students. I've set myself a goal that I want to make my channel the best in the space about providing value to international students by the end of the year. So hopefully I can meet that. But about subscribers, I will leave that up to you guys. Keep commenting and keep supporting and sharing my content. It means a lot. But that being said, I think it's time to introduce my guest, Jade Calver, who runs a Canadian immigration firm in Oshawa, Ontario. Her firm offers a personalized approach to any cases or every case they handle. And so you can receive the best outcome, and they are actually rated Durham region's #1 top immigration firm. So without further ado, let's bring her to stage. Hey, Jade.
Hey, Z, how's it going?
Good. You? How are things?
Great, I'm well, thank you.
Hey, happy to have you on the channel. Honestly, yeah. People from the audience, you can say hi to Jade, but thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no problem, my pleasure.
Yeah, so I want to first of all ask you that you have a YouTube channel, and like you have done something that Canadian immigration lawyers haven't done before. You literally flipped the model where everyone's trying to be secretive with all their tips and tricks and advices, but you're putting it out there on YouTube. And that's such a big purpose, right? Like, what inspired you to get out there and do it for the people?
Yeah, it's, you know, some people do need full service help when it comes to Canadian immigration, but others, a lot of people are DIYers, right? Especially if they're coming to Canada on a study permit.
Right.
There's a lot of misinformation out there as well, especially I always tell my clients, be really wary of forums that you find within the depths of the internet. So yeah, so my YouTube channel, I really try to walk people through the different steps for study permits and other Canadian immigration programs, and really lay it out in plain language, because the immigration website, Canada website, can get a little bit wordy, I find. So that's kind of where the inspiration behind the YouTube videos came from, and we've been doing it for a couple of years now.
No, that's, I think one of the points that you said, plain language, so important, because immigration text, like verbiage, is just so tricky and so finicky, and it's hard to understand.
Exactly, right? And it's, you know, the law can say one thing, and Immigration Canada can put, like, what's written on the website isn't necessarily the actual law, which some people sometimes confuse. So I always take what they've written as their answers with a grain of salt, because some things can be interpreted differently too, right? So sometimes I cover that in my videos as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I have to tell you, like, even I learned a lot from your videos, just giving you a lot of watch time, a bunch of views. No, great content that you share. And those of you who want to check out Jade Calver's channel, you basically look up Jade Calver, JadeCalver on YouTube, and I'll definitely have a link in the description. I think it's already there, that you can go to her channel. But I also want to ask you this one question: why should an international student hire an immigration lawyer?
Yeah, so the nice part about it is that, so most, not everyone, but I say most of the people who come to Canada to study, eventually they'd like to stay long-term. So as a permanent resident, a citizen, or even at least to work for a few years afterwards. And so the nice part about hiring legal representation for an application is that you can make sure that it's done properly. So it makes it so that you can avoid refusals, because as soon as there's a refusal on the table, then you have to address that. It's harder to get an approval after you have a first refusal. And same thing, you want to make sure that there's nothing that you mistakenly say in a study permit application to begin with that would affect future work permit or permanent residency applications. And then lastly, we're always there as kind of a touch point. Like if someone's mid-studying and they have questions about what they're allowed to do on their study permit, or like right now during COVID-19, if there are questions surrounding what they can do with their study permit, then they're there usually to answer questions during any stressful times, with, you know, as it relates to their actual status.
For sure. Like basically anything that gets technical, and if you're not good at what you're doing, if you don't know what you're getting into, definitely get an immigration.
Exactly. Yeah, and the thing is that lots of colleges and universities, they will have international student departments, but we just have to remember, like big universities, they have thousands and thousands of international students, right? So you'll get your 15-minute appointment, but if you have a more complicated case, they might just not have the time to walk you through the entire application, right? So it's just a different level of service and a different level of comfort with the advice that's being given as well, right?
Right. True. Absolutely. Well, I guess that answers that question. I want to acknowledge some of the people in the audience. Hey, Pooja. Hey, Ayat Aurora. Thanks for joining. Said Ahmed, thanks for joining, and Pradeep Sharkar. Hey, thank you. Really appreciate that you guys are taking your time to join our live webinar today. So I guess we'll get into the questions, the most frequently asked questions by international students. So first of all, I'm sure everyone's curious to know right now, what's going on, like with the whole COVID situation? What are the study permit updates and processing times, if that's getting affected, or visa acceptance rate?
Yeah, so Immigration Canada, as far as we're concerned, so they're still processing applications. However, I think that it's really important that people applying from outside of Canada are cognizant that things are slow at visa offices.
Right.
So while processing times might say 2 to 3 weeks on the IRCC website, in reality, that might be a lot longer, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm telling clients to be patient with processing times for applications. Immigration Canada has just released an update. It was last week. And it was surrounding eligibility for postgraduate work permits for someone who studied as a distance learner. So for example, if you're enrolled to go to, let's say, university this fall, at the University of Toronto. And the University of Toronto says, well, we're doing everything online still. Well, what international students can do is that they can still study remotely. So they can actually stay in their home country or be in Canada studying remotely. And that will not affect the postgraduate work permit issuance. So that's really great news, because if your study permit isn't approved, so you can't come to Canada, then what happens is that you can still study online and come to Canada once the study permit is approved, or once you're able to travel. So that's a pretty big change that we've seen with COVID, which is nice, because hopefully it means, hopefully we'll have some implications for policy in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
But we'll see what happens after the end of COVID.
This could change things, yeah.
Yeah, and then as far as students who are already in Canada, I've been doing extensions and postgraduate work permits. Again, they're processing those applications fairly quickly. So I find that their priority is for people who are already in Canada.
Right.
So yeah, but as far as people applying from outside for this September, you can apply, but I'm telling everyone who's applying for September that you may or may not have an approval for September, but you can still start studying. Again, remotely, and that won't affect your future permit application.
Without a study permit?
Yeah, well, you can apply. You can study without the study permit, but then you have to think about, okay, if the study permit isn't approved, Was it worth it for me to have paid tuition to the school?
Right.
So I'm having that discussion with students too, and saying, if the study permit's not approved, like if you're a higher risk applicant, maybe you should think about a deferral until January.
Right.
Then you're not, because it is expensive, right, to pay for tuition.
Right.
So sometimes a deferral makes sense for some students.
So what you just said, basically, to summarize your points, is the processing times are definitely getting extended for sure. But if anyone's still willing to start their school this September, they might not get the chances of their study permit getting approved is not as high, but they can still start their classes. But you would totally recommend they start their classes during winter or moving on forward, right?
Yeah, and it depends on the applicant, right? And we'll get into that a little bit later. But I mean, if you have a very strong case for a study permit and it's just a matter of that it's taking a long time, it makes sense to start your studies, right? But again, it's about the experience too for a lot of people. So some people who may have planned to start this September, but if Canadian universities and colleges are going to have on-campus classes, it does change the experience too, right? Because university is also about having, or colleges having that experience with your peers. So that's something to think about too, is should I be paying for something where I'm just studying at home, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you were to summarize basically, what are the steps to getting a study permit? What are the steps you would say, just the points?
Yeah, so first step is I always say you need an acceptance into a Canadian post-secondary or secondary school. So that's a Canadian, so in Canada we differentiate between university and college. University is your more traditional theoretical study usually, which leads to a bachelor's degree. Colleges also have 3-year programs, and they're a little bit more hands-on and technical. They're great, and you can do a combination of both. A lot of the time in Canada, I don't have a preference over either. And then once you have the acceptance into school, then we start preparing a study permit application. I always apply online for study permit applications. In the actual study permit applications, you always have to show the letter of acceptance and your information, so that you have to have a valid passport. And then the most important information aside from that is usually financial information. That's where I see a lot of refusals. And so it's if you have to show that you have enough for tuition plus $10,000 if you're just one applicant.
So this is an important topic. So so how much money do they have to show?
So tuition. So let's say your tuition, you're going to college here and it's $14,000 Canadian. So that's $14,000, and if you're one person applying, so you don't have a spouse or children, then that's an additional $10,000, so that's $24,000 Canadian. And the important part about that is I really like to show that you can easily pay for that, right? I've had clients in the past who they've come to me with refusals because they applied, especially when tuition's a lot higher, like they've been doing an MBA, for example, and they pieced together various accounts that just barely showed that they could afford the tuition, right? And for Immigration Canada, when the officer is looking at the application, they'll say, is this person going to, because we don't want students to not be able to afford their life if they come to Canada, because for obvious reasons. And so they look at the application and they want to make sure that either you or your parents can afford to pay tuition. So I always pay tuition up front for a study permit application. So that covers tuition, and then making sure that you can show that you can comfortably afford the fees and living fees. So it's really important to show that as well.
So it's 1 year of tuition fee plus $10,000. So if there's a university that's $32,000, you just add $10,000 to it for you.
Yeah, exactly. And then that can be shown either in a bank account, like if you have the living funds, that's fine. And then if your parents are helping to pay, like lots of people come when they're young, at 17 and 18, you don't usually have that money that's yours. So a lot of the time we'll include employment letters and a letter of financial support from a parent showing that they're
Right.
going to support the application.
Right.
And then other than that, in a study permit application, so this is really for people who are applying, like I would say they're within the recent graduation phase. So they've either just finished high school or maybe just finished a bachelor's degree and they're coming to do a graduate program here. If you're older, so if you've been out of school for a little while, it's really important to include a study plan and to explain why you're taking this course.
Mm-hmm.
It helps because with a study permit application, you have to show that you can afford your stay, and they like to see ties to your home country.
Right.
So we like to, the older the student is, it's a little bit harder to show that they're not coming here to permanently settle, right? So we like to include that study plan just to declare that they're coming here temporarily, even if the end goal is a permanent residency visa. We like to show that they, even if they had to leave Canada, that it would help them in their home country.
Yeah, that's the tricky part about the whole SOP, right? Like you have to show that you're leaving Canada, but your end goal is kind of PR. It's like
exactly. Yeah, and so it is counterintuitive for sure, right? Especially, again, as I said, most of my clients are coming here, not everyone, but most clients are coming here to study and eventually stay. So even if that is your goal, which is most applicants' goal, you still want to show that you're going to leave Canada at the end of your authorized temporary stay.
Right.
And that's when that letter of explanation or study, letter of intent, whatever you want to call it, that's when that really comes into play in an application.
Right. Can the processing time of an application be accelerated by any chance, or is it always going to be what it says on the website?
Yes, so it's usually what's on the website. The Immigration Canada, they introduced recently what's called the Student Direct Stream, so SDS for short. And it was for countries where processing times were becoming more like longer and longer. Right. And what happens, it's only for specific countries. So it's countries, I have a blog post about it, but there's Pakistan, Morocco, Vietnam, China, the Philippines, and a couple of others.
India's on it too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so the nice part about it is that if you meet certain criteria, the most important ones are showing your level of English. So you have to have 6 band in IELTS overall, and also a GIC account. So that's a guaranteed investment account of $10,000. What it allows you to do is you get to benefit from the 2-week processing times for an application, which is great, right? Because previous to that, like if you look at the regular processing times for some of those countries, it can sometimes be 4 or 5 months. So the 2 weeks compared to 4 or 5 months is great, right? And then again, always online, I find that things go faster online rather than applying in person.
Great. Okay, I'm gonna answer take some of the questions and see. Some people are asking. Thanks again, guys, for asking questions. It helps me with my engagement. So, in the pandemic situation, people can't go for medical because there's only one authorized medical center. I guess if someone can do their medicals right now, their application is going to be on hold, right?
Yeah. So, Immigration Canada, while they're being lenient with some applications, like they still, like they'll accept applications that aren't like you can include a letter of explanation.
Yeah.
For example, if that country requires a medical or that visa office requires a police certificate, they're not going to magically waive the requirement. It will just be on hold.
Right.
So most of my clients, what I'm saying right now is, maybe let's think about deferring an application until, for a few months to apply for the January intake, right? Because if you submit an application with lots of letters of explanation because you're missing documentation, it's not going to magically be approved faster, right? It'll just be on hold with the visa office. So a lot of the time it makes sense just to wait on the application and to apply when you know it's complete.
That's a good point. So this question right here, hello, is it possible to get visa for September session from Bangladesh? I guess Jade already kind of answered this. The chances are pretty slim, right? Right, Jade?
Yeah, I mean, it depends if the person, I'm not sure if the person has applied already or not.
Yeah.
And then obviously it depends on processing times, right? At the end of the day, like if you apply for a study permit, if you've already applied for a study permit or you apply now and you're supposed to come to Canada for September 2020 and it's not approved in time, you can always defer enrollment, right, with your university or college, and then come from when you actually have an approved study permit, which I talked about a little bit earlier, right?
Exactly.
Which then you can start studying remotely with that school, but you might want to think about just deferring to maybe a January intake.
Because you don't really lose money if you do it early, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Another question: what kind of letter we have to write for applying for study visa to the embassy? I think we already kind of covered it. You have to just convince the officer that you're leaving Canada. But just
so if you're coming straight from high school or straight from a bachelor's degree, it's not necessarily. I don't find it to be too important as someone who's older. So if someone's been out of school for 4 or 5 years or longer and is going to go back to school, that letter needs to include why they're taking that program, how it fits in with their career goals. And I always include a statement saying that they're going to go back to their home country and how that program of study is going to help their career in their home country. Again, even if that's not the goal, it needs to be the goal for right now.
Right. And just to add to this, guys, like I did this giveaway before. I'm willing to give away my study plan that I wrote for coming to Canada. And if you guys share this video on your Facebook profile and you follow me on Instagram at @side_chub, just send me a screenshot of those 2 things that you did. And I will send you my personal study plan. You can also give a couple of, I think I already gained a couple of subscribers. I've been reading some comments. Like they're checking out your channel. Check out Jade's channel, by the way, at Jade Calver. There's another question that was asked. Are we allowed to come to Canada after 31st September? I have September 2020 and take online.
So again, that's with the study permit.
Same thing, yeah.
Yeah. And again, if you don't have that study permit approved, you might want to think about, does it make sense for me to start studying, or do I want to wait until I know that I can come to Canada?
Right. How to write explanation letter for sponsors fund. We won't answer that in this live stream today. I would suggest you hire an immigration consultant for that because that is very technical. You can't ask for everything from Jay today. So if you were to suggest manual submission versus online, so like candidates can actually submit manually through VFS, or would you just recommend them to apply online?
Yeah, because I'm here in Canada, so for my clients abroad, I apply online for them. So in terms of applying online, they tend to go a little bit faster. It also depends on how quickly the visa office processes applications, right? Like if it's a couple of weeks, and if you're from a country where you know you're going to have to submit your passport already, the nice part about applying in person is that you submit the physical passport, and so it can be looked at a little bit faster, right? All extensions now, like in Canada, we have to do everything online now. But I just would say apply online. Again, it's fine. And if you're far from a visa application center, you're going to have to courier your passport in anyway. So it's neither. Between the two, I don't find there to be a big difference anymore these days.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think it was always in my head. It was a big debate as to like, is manual better or online better? But
I mean, there's a common misconception that it might look better if it's a paper application. But I find that they do go a little bit slower in general. So I would apply online. It's what they prefer.
Right. What are the top 3 reasons you would say a visa application gets denied for?
So in terms of reasons, so again, we had talked about it a little bit before. So fees. So people, again, and it's usually my clients, it's not because they don't have the fees. They call me and then I will look at the documentation they've provided. So in immigration law, we talk about material facts. And so what it means is that you can say that you have enough money, but unless you actually substantiate it with evidence, then the visa officer can have, with good reason, a reason to refuse the application, right? Because they'll say you provide the proof, right? And so even though you can say, so for example, your parents can write you a letter saying that they're going to fund your studies, but if you don't include that employment letter or proof of their bank statement, again, if you're from a country with higher, like there's some countries where I just find there's a higher risk of refusal, that can be a major flag, right? In terms of other refusals, it's the second highest reason I would say is the lack of ties to home country and or travel history. So that's, again, usually with...
lack of ties, huh? That's pretty important.
Yeah, so you have to show ties to your home country, especially, again, if you're an older applicant. I usually like to see proof of assets and proof of employment in your home country. So if you haven't been working in your home country for some time and you're an older applicant, like, do you have ties or do you have job opportunities in that country, right?
Right.
Lack of travel history, we can usually get around, but I do prefer to see some travel history outside of the country. It helps with an application.
Interesting. Okay. And when a candidate is in Canada, what could get their visa denied? Like, what could get their visa canceled?
Canceled, do you mean?
Yeah. Like the study permit gets canceled, like a student's here and then it gets revoked or something.
It doesn't usually happen that often in terms of them revoking a visa. I mean, if you misrepresented in an application,
right.
Or if you, usually what happens, people apply for the wrong permit in Canada is what happens a lot.
Wow.
And so sometimes, because it's really important, so this is a key concept with study permits. So there's a study permit, which allows you to study in Canada, and the study permit always has to be valid when you're here in Canada. And then there's the visa. A lot of people confuse visa and permit.
I did.
Yeah. So visas are just to fly to Canada. Like, by the time you get to Canada, if you're not leaving, you don't actually need a new visa for the entire time, right? You just need renewing the study permit. And so it's really important to make sure you apply for the right thing. So don't apply to extend your visa, because it doesn't matter if you have a visa or not to study. It's about the permit itself.
Right. Cool. Looking at some of the comments. Hey guys, new people joining. Thank you. It would be awesome if you guys could just let me know what countries you guys are from. Just let me know in the comments. That'll be interesting to see. Okay, next question I want to ask is, so I get this asked a lot, and I actually don't know the answer to this, but I guess you're the person to answer. Does applying for a college versus a university make any difference to get a student visa? Is it a myth, or it's actually true?
I think that a better question is, so I don't think college versus university makes a difference. I think that we need to think about reputation of the school.
Right.
So a lot of the time, and we can touch on this a little bit more, so we have in Canada, so most colleges and universities are public institutions. And then we also have private colleges, and that's usually where I see the highest rate of refusal, mostly because you have to think about if this program is easy to get into, and if this program isn't asking for my proof of language or proof of previous studies, then it's probably not, you have to kind of question the rigor of the program, and is it reputable, right? And so Immigration Canada takes that into consideration. And then at the same time, so college, of course, a lot of the time they'll offer shorter courses. And so that's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing a 1 or 2 year course, but it does have, the officer looks at your application holistically. And so you have to think about, does it matter if, or does it make sense that I'm taking this program with my career goals, right? So that's when it choosing a university or college, it also comes into play with your study plan.
Mhm.
So I'm not necessarily opposed to college or university. Like, I don't see higher rates of acceptance or refusal for either, rather than is it a private college and what's the repute of the institution that they're applying to.
Right. So it's the reputation that really matters compared to.
Yeah, I mean, we have colleges in Canada, like especially in Ontario, for example, like there are some big colleges like Seneca, George Brown,
Yes.
like they're pretty well known and respected
Okay.
institutions, right?
So
So
students can apply for private universities that are not really well known. That might actually decrease their chances of visa approval rate.
exactly, yeah. So lots of people, and they're tempted, especially by the private colleges, which I think we'll get into a little bit later,
Right.
to apply to the private colleges because admission is quick, but it can, a study permit can be a little bit more difficult to get when it comes to applying for, depending on the program, of course, too.
Right.
But the study permit can be a little bit more difficult to get through a private college, and then obviously that affects you getting a postgraduate work permit as well, which we can talk about also.
Right. Hi, Ayat from the audience. Can you just ask your question again? Sorry, we missed that. Okay, so what if a student decides to drop out of school and just pursue full-time work experience? I definitely know it's a no-go, but what would you have to say to that?
Yeah, so what happens, so when you're a student, so almost all study permits, they come with what we call an underlying work permit. So you can work 20 hours off campus while you're in school full-time, and then as many hours as you want during scheduled breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind too, sometimes people forget, like if they're wanting to work more, the off-campus work permit, like it only applies, that 20-hour limit only applies to off-campus work, right? So technically you could work at your school library or somewhere on campus as many hours as you wanted, or combine it with outside work, right?
Right.
So some people think that they can't work full-time as a student, which again, there are other reasons for not working full-time as a student, but it is an option, right?
Okay.
And then as far as dropping to, not taking any course.
Yeah, so they decided, you know what, they became their own experts, right? And they were like, you know what, I'm not gonna study next semester, but I'm just gonna go to work full-time for 4 months, try to make up for that money, and then go back to school. I know that you can definitely not do that, but is there any option they could ever do that?
Technically, you can take a leave of absence from school, so you can take,
Okay.
if it's less than 150 days, like you technically can.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue is that if you want that postgraduate work permit,
Right.
because you have to show that you are you're actively pursuing studies.
Right.
And so I find that students, they'll often have an issue with getting a postgraduate work permit if they stop for a semester.
Mm-hmm.
So usually a better option is maybe taking a lighter course load. So some schools will still consider 3 courses a semester to be full-time. You would be surprised, like a university a lot of the time will let you take a much reduced course load without saying that you're a part-time student or not a full-time student.
Okay, cool. And I had the situation with a friend who only had 1 course to finish in his last semester because, he probably didn't pass a course or something like that. When you have 1 course in your last semester, can you actually work full-time?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So you can in your last semester. Okay. So if you're only taking 1 course, so the rules for work off campus
Mm-hmm.
is that if you're in your last semester, you're allowed to work full-time in your very last semester.
Oh, even if you have full-time classes?
Yes, but the idea is that you are taking 1 or 2 courses to finish your...
Right. This is good information, by the way. Yeah, this is this was a really confusing part for most international students where they always have 2 courses or 1 course left, but then they don't know if they can work full-time. So thank you for sharing that. How long can an international student stay out of Canada on a study permit or work permit? Like, let's say if they're planning on traveling, they start thinking that, you know what, during summertime, I'm just going to take a break and tour the world. And can they just stay out of Canada for 4 months, or is there like a certain limit on that?
Yeah, so the golden rule is always 150 days with a study permit.
Okay.
So the 150 days comes from the 4-month summer break calculation, right? Because
Right.
take summer break, even the longest is usually 4 months in university.
Mhm.
So that means that most people can go on a regular scheduled break for their 4 months. Lots of university students, they go home for the summer, they go to see their family, etc. So that's fairly typical of
So 150 days, that's the max.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Now, if someone's, let's say, overambitious like I am, and there's a photographer, let's say, or a videographer, and they're asked to like provide some services for campus, right? Like take photos for an event or something like that, and they get paid for that. Does that count towards their work hours, even though it's not really coordinated with their SIN number and stuff like that? Like, is that something international students should do?
Like technically it should be, right? Because when you're being paid for work in Canada, that's considered, or even sometimes unpaid work is considered work in Canada.
Mhm.
So your open work permit, you can be employed or self-employed as a student. So that's technically self-employment that you're being paid for, which technically you should declare that you did. So technically, yes, but of course, it depends what you declare, right?
It really goes under the table.
If we're going by tax and immigration rules, like yes, you should be declaring it.
Right. Okay. So now we're going into PR. So all this time we talked about study permit. Now this is like the final round of questions. So what's an ideal roadmap for an international student to get their permanent residency in Canada?
Yeah. So I guess we'll first touch on the postgraduate work permit because that's a really important key component of qualifying for permanent residency.
Right.
So students who study for 2 years or less, like under 2 years, they'll be issued a study permit for the length of their program. So for example, if you come and you do a master's that's 14 months in length, you'll be given a postgraduate work permit for 14 months. Same thing if you just do one postgraduate certificate of 1 year, you'll be given a postgraduate work permit for 1 year. If you study for 2 years or more, so it can be 2 one-year courses or a 3-year program, etc., then you'll be given a 3-year postgraduate work permit. And so the postgraduate work permit is an open work permit.
Right.
And so right now,
open work permit, or it is an open work.
It is. It's
okay, yeah. Because I was scared. I was like, wait, what? All right.
Completely open work permit. And so the nice part is that it allows international students who've graduated in Canada to start working for any employer in Canada, anywhere, which is really nice because sometimes you need to go to a different province to qualify for permanent residency, right?
Right.
And so it obviously depends on the applicant, but if you are coming to Canada and you don't have any work experience from your home country, you're going to definitely want to study for at minimum 2 years so that you can get your 3-year postgraduate work permit. But ideally, just because you have to be cognizant of the fact that lots of people think, okay, I'll come to Canada, I'll study, and then I'll qualify for permanent residency. But it is quite competitive these days, especially because we're seeing an influx of people who have studied in the United States and they can't get immigration, and other countries. So you have to really consider, yes, it might be tempting to take a shorter course, but that 3-year program at a college or university, especially if you're younger, I would just, if you can, do that now and put in the time and effort, because it's really going to help you in terms of qualifying for permanent residency programs. And also be careful to, when you're going to school, I always say, if you can, avoid the private institutions. So those are the like they may be a DLI, but you have to check to make sure that you can get a postgraduate work permit.
Right.
Because a lot of the private institutions, you can't get a postgraduate work permit after, right?
That is
So
how would they know that for this specific private university?
On the IRCC website,
Okay.
it will say, like, if when you're checking if a school is a DLI,
Right.
it will say yes or no. So then you can know if you can get a study permit for it.
Yeah, I did it myself. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have to check. It'll say right beside it, eligible for postgraduate work permit programs. And if the answer is no, honestly, I just wouldn't touch that program if your goal is permanent residency.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to come here temporarily, fine, you can get your
So
study.
it depends on the program too, huh? Like besides the institution, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so Immigration Canada, they determine that before you come to Canada, so you can check that before you come. And then back to permanent residency. So again, I prefer a longer program. If you already have a bachelor's degree or for your program from your home country, then that's okay. Then you can think about doing maybe a 1 or 2 year postgraduate or like a postgraduate certificate here in Canada, or a master's degree. And then most applicants will go through it's called the Express Entry program. And it's a points-based system, and you're given points based on your age, level of education. So you get extra points for Canadian education, your language level, and your work history. And so that's why if you don't have work history or education from home, if you're coming right out of high school to Canada, again, I really recommend and stress that you take at least a 3-year program here in Canada. It can be at a college or a university, either are fine. And then from there, my clients, I always advise that they really start thinking about making sure that they have that job offer lined up for when they graduate. So you need to have 1 year of skilled work experience in order to qualify for Express Entry. And honestly, most other of the provincial nomination programs will have similar program requirements. And so in Canada, we differentiate between high skilled and low skilled work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always say, when I have a client who's graduating within the next 6 to 8 months, I say, you need to start applying for jobs now if they're not working, or if they're already working in a position, we have to check and make sure it's skilled work, or they have to have that discussion with their employer and say, what can I do to move into a skilled position? So that's really important because those 3 years go by really quickly, right? So you have to make sure that you have that experience, and it doesn't have to be in your field, which is for the most part, which is like
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, so many people get confused about it.
So I have a lot of people who they've worked in a restaurant or maybe in a store, for example, while they were studying. And supervisors and managers in retail and in food service, that's considered skilled work, right? Because you're managing the budget, managing people. And so you can actually start working in those positions. Mm-hmm. And if, you can actually combine work experience for your Canadian work experience. So if you have 5 months where you were working, supervising in a fast food restaurant, for example, and then you get a job in your field, we can combine the 5 months plus the 7 months that you have from another position in order to make up for the 1 year of work in Canada.
Does any of the experience they accumulate during their study period, like working full-time during those summer breaks, like the scheduled breaks, does that count towards your PR or no?
It doesn't count, unfortunately.
Okay.
But a lot of people, I wouldn't say don't work during school because it doesn't count, because it's so crucial to have that Canadian work experience on your resume when you're applying for jobs once you graduate, right? Because if an employer sees that you've been in Canada for 3 or 4 years already, lots of people, again, they talk about they go home for the summer, but if you had the opportunity for 4 years to take internships or jobs while you're here in Canada and you didn't take advantage of it, it's not going to be as helpful for you, right, when you're applying for positions. Absolutely. So again, I tell people to, even after their first year, to start trying to get work experience so that they can get it on their resume And if the employer likes you, usually they'll hire you for some sort of position once you graduate, right?
Absolutely. And thanks for reinstating that. Like, that's what I always preach in my channel. It's like your PR is going to eventually come, but you got to focus on your skilled work experience. Like, it matters so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Is there any other way around? So we're kind of coming to the end of this conversation, but is there any way around the work experience that people can go for to qualify for PR?
There can be. So with Express Entry, again, if you already have work experience from outside of Canada, you may already qualify for Express Entry when you come to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So if your English level is very high and you're doing a master's here, for example, you may qualify when you finish your master's. You may not need the work experience in Canada.
Right.
Some of the provinces, like Ontario, for example, they have programs where if you have a job offer, not the work experience, but a job offer, you can qualify for their permanent residency programs. But those programs, they tend to be very popular and competitive because obviously you have to work for the year first. So they usually open and close within a few weeks or days even. Mm-hmm. So they're not my first suggestion for permanent residency planning because Express Entry is a little bit more stable. The federal programs, they don't change as quickly. Whereas provincial programs, they can change overnight because program requirements can be changed easily, right?
Right. Sounds good. I guess that's kind of mostly, could I get some personal advice from you, for myself? Yeah. So I think my 1 year work hours clock in September, but I'm actually planning to go back home for 4 to 5 months for a certain project. And would you advise that I should leave before I apply for my PR or after I apply for my PR? Like, I'm aware of that whole 2-year living in Canada situation, but would you recommend me that I get my travels done before I apply for that PR?
What I usually do is I like to have a person have submitted their permanent residency before they leave. The reason being is that, so if you're here actively working and living in Canada, then you're accumulating more time towards the requirement, right? Yeah. And so Express Entry, how it works, if you're in the pool, the points can fluctuate up and down pretty quickly. Wow. And so I like to see people have the invitation to apply, and then we can apply for permanent residency. Then that way, you know, your application is in, it's being processed. This is assuming someone has a strong case, and then that way they can leave Canada and travel if they're wanting to travel.
And there is no that certain golden rule of 150 days. Like, I know, but I gotta stay in Canada for 2 years.
Yeah, so with the postgraduate work permit, when you're on an open work permit, you can technically not be here at all, right? But we just, again, that comes with the risk of if a permanent residency application were ever refused, then you have to think about, do I need that extra time to apply for permanent residency again in the future? True. So we take each person's situation is different, so we look at it. And that's what immigration consultants and lawyers do, right? They say, they weigh your options and make sure that you understand the risk of doing different things.
Hey, this is all exciting. Like, it's making me feel ecstatic. Like, this video was so insightful. It has so much content in it. Yeah. So that's great. But hey, like, if I were to open up like a consultation firm for students planning on coming to Canada in my home country or somewhere else, I would definitely love to partner up with you. Like, if you're open to it and have these files get managed by you, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, that's good.
But so I want to know, so what's your next video on your channel? Like, what is it about and what can people learn from your channel?
Yes. Yeah, we're going to be a couple of things. So we're going to be covering applying for DLIs versus non-DLIs and also private versus public colleges and universities, because I find that's not very well understood. And then we're going to be concentrating also on people looking to come to Canada to study in the tech fields, and then transitioning towards permanent residency and what that job outlook looks like for international students in tech and university in Canada. So that's kind of what we have coming up.
That's amazing. That's great content. So anyone who's watching, please make sure to visit Jade Calver's channel. I'm just gonna put it in the comments. I'm still figuring out this whole video her thing. I don't know how to properly, so I think that's her name. But from it, I'll answer some of the questions that's been coming, and if you guys have any questions, keep them coming because we're just gonna do Q&A for the next 5 minutes. All right, so I didn't understand this question, Aurora. Hello, sir. I actually haven't taken that. Don't call me sir, by the way. I feel freaking so some people have been calling me sir for the last couple of weeks. I'm planning to pursue nursing in Canada, so what kind of maths test is there? This is more of an admissions question, right?
So that, again, some people ask me, but it depends on the institution. So each college and university will have different prerequisite requirements for applying to their programs. So usually, like, for example, there's a college locally here called Durham College, and they have a list depending on which country you're from. So for example, if you are from India, for example, they'll say, like, having done your 12th certificate, you need these courses and you need these grades in order to qualify for to apply for that program, right? So it's really country dependent.
Okay, and I will also mention to the viewers that I will have an international student admissions recruitment officer coming in one of my live streams very soon. So that should be another insightful webinar just like this. So I have this. There's another question. I've been accepted by university, but I haven't paid my tuition fees. So should someone just wait till January, or should they? Because as you mentioned, they can just defer the application, right?
Yeah. So if you're accepted for September, but you're not planning to go for September, like apply for September, then you'd have to contact the university and say, I'm wanting to defer for January. So I'd get the deferral first so that you have an updated acceptance letter for an application, and then you would pay tuition for January rather than September if that's what you're planning to do.
Okay. Someone asked about credit transfer, but that's definitely an admissions question. Yeah, absolutely. I'm just gonna respond to them in the comments. And I'll take one more question. So this person, so this is a good question. So if they don't get their study permit approved, means they're not going to be able to enter Canada, right?
Yeah, without a study permit, you can't come to Canada.
Yeah, so that kind of answers the question right away there. After the first year program, by continuing the professional college. Okay, that's a very confusing question.
No, I think I understand. So if you do, so this is what I was talking about earlier. So if you do, let's say, for example, you come to Canada and you do a 1-year certificate at a college, and then you do a second program, a second 1-year certificate, then I think he's asking, can I get a 3-year postgraduate work permit? So the answer for now is yes. So you can get a 3-year postgraduate work permit if you've studied for 2 years, but 2 separate certificates. But keep in mind that in terms, not that I can predict immigration policy changes,
right,
but I think that if ever they were going to change policy, this could be something that might be revised. So you might want to think about that as well.
Okay. And then this is the last question I'm going to take. And what's this? 12, so a gap year. So this is a very common question asked. So how many years of gap studies can study gaps is actually accepted when people are planning to apply for the visa application?
Yeah, so I mean, technically you can be out of school, like anyone with acceptance can apply, right? But you have to explain, so if you've been out of school for 5 years, then you need to explain what you've been doing. And then in your study, that's when the study plan becomes very important, as well as proof of ties to your home country, because you have to show what you've been doing and why you're taking this course, because they want to make sure that it's not just superfluous and that you're not just applying for the purpose of immigration only. So for example, if this person said that he's been working with his father in the agricultural field, So, for example, if you came to Canada and were doing a postgraduate certificate in some sort of agricultural studies with how it relates to technology, it makes sense, right? But if all of a sudden you decide I'm going to come to Canada and undertake a nursing or a chef program, the immigration officer may question, especially if in your study permit plan, like people can have a change of heart, but it may not make sense for you to all of a sudden change vocation suddenly if you're not doing that in your home country.
Okay. Cool. I think that's most it. And I wanted to just take one last question because I wanted to answer that because I love to talk about marketing. And someone said, the one question was the value of marketing and data analytics program in the Canadian job market. I have to say every business needs a marketing person. Even Jade has a marketing person in her team. So even a Canadian immigration law firm needs it. So every business always needs a marketing manager or a coordinator. And data analytics, a lot of companies are moving to big data and they love reading data. Even I'm a marketing manager and I read data all the time. So if you're data analytics expert, it really comes in handy on your resume. So you're going to be in a good position.
And the nice part about it, the Conference Board of Canada, so they have some really good studies and statistics on which occupations will be the most in demand in the next 10 years, and which cities are going to have the highest rate of attrition, so the most people retiring in the next 10 years. So the nice part about it is that if you're wondering about which occupation should I be studying in, which industry should I be studying in, and which occupation should I pursue in Canada in order to have the best job and the highest salaries, they provide some really interesting statistics as well.
For sure. All right. I guess that is, hey, I asked you to be here for 30 minutes, but I'm sorry it took 1 hour. Thanks for putting away this amount of time to do this. This was really helpful for the people. And this video will be posted on my channel, and it will come with all the questions listed by the timestamp, and that will be in the description. But hey, Jade, thanks again for your time. I wish you all the best with your business, and any of the people who's watching this, if you're planning on coming to Canada, you can definitely get in touch with Jay to get help with your application. But also, when you move here and if you're applying for your PR, make sure to get in touch with Jade because PR is something that you don't want to mess up in your application. So yeah.
Great. Thanks. Have a great day.
All right. You too. Jade, bye-bye. Take care.